Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Herbal Prepper Live, where we discuss herbal and natural medicine for emergency preparedness because your health deserves a plan B. I'm your host, Kat, the Herbal Prepper. My goal is to help you and your family be better prepared for life's emergencies, especially when there are no doctors or pharmacies available. Before I kick off tonight's show, however, I need to satisfy the legal department here with a few quick disclaimers. I am not a doctor. I do not prescribe or practice medicine. I do not diagnose, treat, or claim to cure any disease or illness. If you need medical advice or treatment, please seek out a licensed physician. All listeners are strongly encouraged to learn and research the safety and efficacy of herbal remedies for themselves and to develop their own opinions. The topics discussed are hypothetical and provided for informational purposes only. Use at your own risk and with a heavy dose of common sense. With that said, Herbal Prepper Live is one herbalist's opinion on alternatives to modern medicine during a total collapse of our way of life. In this hypothetical scenario, there are no doctors, no EMTs, no hospitals, and no pharmacies. Professional medical help is simply not an option. If you or your loved ones need health care, the buck stops with you. So I ask you, if we were faced with the end of the world as we know it tomorrow, such as an economic collapse, an EMP or other attack on our electrical grid, civil unrest, martial law, the suspension of the Constitution, the zombie apocalypse itself, could you care for your and your loved one's health care needs? If you answered no and you'd like to change that, please keep listening because this show is for you.
Okay, so with that out of the way, welcome everyone back to another episode of Herbal Prepper Live. Our show airs live every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Pacific, and today is Sunday, January 14th, 2017. So welcome to everyone who is tuning in live this evening, everyone in the chat room. I will be back in the chat room momentarily. My computer's doing something a little wonky and a little weird, so I'm restarting it here. And I am calling in on the phone tonight to make sure that the connection is nice and steady, so we don't have anything. We don't have any broken connection. I think I may know what it is, but I can't actually fix it for at least a couple of weeks. So, with that being said, I also, before I forget, welcome everyone who is listening to this later on in the download. Maybe you're on your way to work and you're listening to it there. So this week, we're talking about yarrow. This is a very lovely plant, very pretty. Comes in a number of different colors, white, pink, and so on. But its very pretty appearance belies a very powerful and potent medicine with it. So we're going to be talking about its obvious, most well-known use, which is to slow the flow of blood from a wound. And, you know, this has been, it's given rise to a number of different folk names, such as the battlefield herb, soldier's woundwort, herb militaris, nosebleed, bloodwort, staunchweed, you know, something of blood, sanguinary. These are all folk names for yarrow because of its ability to sort of control the flow of blood. But this is just one use of it, and it's much more of a nuanced plant than just that because the properties of it can be different depending on whether or not you take it as a hot tea, whether you take this as a cold tea. So it changes depending on the application of it. And it also changes, how should I put this? There are times where it seems to help push out old blood, or blood where you're, in times where like you're supposed to be letting go of blood, where you're supposed to be getting it out. So a lot of these will be like in menstrual situations or in childbirth and whatnot. But it's also not the only herb that is known for doing this, but it is probably the most well-known for this. So we're also going to be talking about some of Yarrow's other properties and the other applications that you can use Yarrow in your herbal practices. Not that everybody is opening up an herbal business, but your personal herbal first aid kits, I guess. So for those who are listening live, if you have something that you want to share, if you have a nagging question, please join us here on prepperbroadcasting.com, especially if you were listening over at Blog Talk. Come on over to prepperbroadcasting.com and type your question in there. I will be right back in that chat room momentarily. My computer looks like it is starting to function better, coming out of its sort of zombie-like performance of just a few moments ago, so who knows what that was about. In the meantime, we kind of have this really nasty flu that's going around, and yes, you could use Yarrow in relieving some of those symptoms and getting to feeling better a little faster with that. So there are applications for Yarrow even with something like the flu, especially where you have, or respiratory conditions in general, where you have really, really bad coughing, especially those where you may be coughing up blood. Again, it's sort of it controls, and it just, the way my first herbal teacher would put it, Linda Patterson, she had said, it just sort of knows what to do when it comes to Yarrow. It knows how to control the blood, whether it's supposed to move the blood out, or whether it is supposed to staunch it and keep it, and help it clot. It's not just an herb that helps to just stop bleeding. There are times where it helps to move the blood, move it out. So it's almost got this sort of intelligence about it that you definitely need to practice with it a bit. So this flu, the state of Alabama declared a state of emergency over the flu this year. This year, the flu vaccine that they picked, the strain of the flu that they were working with here, I guess, the vaccine is estimated to be less than 10% effective. That's really not good. I don't know anyone that would consider that to be a success, to have just 10% effectiveness. So I just want to put the word out there. If you can avoid going out to public places, you can avoid. If you have the option of, let's say, working from home, telecommuting, please do so. It's not worth, if it's really active in your area, and it's highly active in a bunch of states, like something like, it's over 40 states now, where it's highly active. If it's in your area and everybody's getting sick around you, then this might be time to perhaps telecommute into work. If you think that you might have the flu, this is a bad one. This one. There's never a good one. I think every year and every time the flu goes around, everyone's like, "Oh, this is a bad one. This is a bad one." This really is. This has some very severe symptoms, and there have been a number of deaths from it already. And we're not even halfway through cold and flu season. So please make sure that if you do go out, that you wash your hands really well. Try not to touch your face a whole lot, because it will migrate. This will migrate to your mouth and your nose very easily. Let me see here. I'm trying to get back into the chat room here. One moment. It shouldn't be long. So if if you have the option of staying home, please do so. Otherwise, wash your hands, keep your hands away from your face. Make sure that you get enough sleep. Make sure that you are, make sure that you're well rested. Try not to get too stressed out, which is, I know, a little difficult when we got things like these false alarms going on with Hawaii and that text message that got sent out. That's some crazy stuff right there. A lot of people panicked, over, that text message that went out. And, I mean, understandably, it's understandable, that they would be panicked over that. I'd be panicked over that. And I think a lot of people are revisiting whether or not prepping is such a kooky idea or not right now. Because where would you go? Where would you go if you had to, ride it out for a couple of weeks? Do you have a couple of weeks worth of food? I think there's a lot of people right now who are rethinking that. So let's see here. Why don't we, let me get through some of this business stuff first, then we'll take a quick break here. So I already mentioned, if you are over at Blog Talk, come on over and join us here at prepperbroadcasting.com and join the chat room here, and make sure that while you're here, you check out all of the other shows. There's shows going every night, I believe, and, there's so many archived episodes here, so many different topics that have already been covered. If you are, looking up just about anything about prepping, you'll find it here. So don't shortchange yourself. Take a gander around the website here. There's lots of information. And for those people who may be new to the show, I have 2 books that I have written that, I'm very proud of, and I really firmly believe that you need these in your prepper library. The first one is Prepper's Natural Medicine. This is a crash course in herbalism. This is the next best thing to taking a class with me. I wrote this, and I touched on topics, all the things that I wish that I would have known when I was first learning, because I spent a number of years learning. Before I ever took an herbal certification course or anything, I spent a lot of years with just books, being able to call various people locally that, like one owned an herb shop, they knew, more than what I did. And, it was a lot of trial and error. So I really tried to address like the bigger questions that I had, the real stumbling blocks that I had in this book. But it also covers a whole bunch more than just the skills. It also covers the therapeutic properties of 50 different herbs. There are herbal formulas to get you prepared for both acute, chronic conditions. It goes through how to put together an herbal first aid kit. There's really a ton of information packed into a tiny space. The other book is Prepping for a Pandemic, and this has so much critical information that you really need to have to be ready for a pandemic. And influenza happens to be my top pick. I have like 7 of them that I cover in the book. Influenza is number 1, and because it has such an opportunity to mutate, because it's active all year long. It's in some part of the world it's active. But anyway, this book covers all of the really hard lessons that we can learn from the Ebola outbreak of 2014, how we can apply this knowledge to protect ourselves from future deadly pandemics. And honestly, it covers so much more than that. So there's really nothing else like it on the market. So if you are serious about being ready, really being prepared, then I suggest you go pick up both of them. There's tons of information packed into, both of these. I honestly think you're really shortchanging yourself if you don't. So these can both be found at the Prepper Broadcasting Bookshop on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, everywhere books are sold. And let's see here. I think that's it for any announcements that I have at the moment. So, yeah, why don't we take a quick break here. When we come back, let's sort of dive into the nuances and the uses here of yarrow. I think you're going to be rather impressed with that. So we will be right back. All right, so we are back, and I am back in the chat room so I can keep an eye on there, and obviously I guess you guys were talking about me. That's fine. That's fine. I can live with that. So yarrow, the battlefield herb, that's the name that I've heard the most of. And I think that, when we talk about how it controls the blood, the movement of blood, I think that's probably a better way to look at it than, this simply is just an agent that makes the blood clot. It's not always so cut and dry. Sometimes it's not about making the blood clot, but about getting it to move, and which is sort of the opposite of it. And like I said, different preparations of it will produce different results, which is kind of neat. One thing that I want to mention is that yarrow, if you had to make a choice as to what to use, and you see different colors of blood, let's say, if you are, if you're aware of, how should I put this? Different colors of blood for different types of bleeding. So if you have, let's say, an arterial bleed, that's bright red. It pulses. It will kind of spurt because, rhythmically, because the heart's pumping, and so every time the heart pumps, it kind of spurts a bit. That bright red bleeding, that would be a case for yarrow. If you have something that is darker and just sort of oozes, that's actually a better case for a different herb entirely called shepherd's purse, and I can cover that in another episode. But for a lot of yarrow gets a lot of attention, but shepherd's purse, you really should have that there as well. They do basically the same thing, but in different cases. So again, if you see bright red blood, that's when you go for yarrow. If it's darker and oozing, then you reach for shepherd's purse. Now, yarrow works really well. So let's say you have for stopping bleeding. That's what we know it for most. So let's focus on that. So ways that this could be employed. You could get yarrow flowers. You usually use the flowers, but it's not. You could use the leaves too. Let's say that's what was available. Someone's come through the area and they've already wildcrafted a bunch of the flowers, and there's flowers left, and you can recognize the plant, and but there's no flowers. Something like that. It's a scenario that I could foresee if resources are scarce and such. So you got to be prepared for that. So you could use the leaves, but in general you want to use the flowers. So you would take the tops, and you can do a number of things with that. You can make a tincture out of that. You can make a tea out of that. You can take the flowers and powder them up, and you can put them into a wound powder. You can blend that with other herbs to make an even better wound powder, so maybe something that is soothing to the skin, like some type of a demulcent. My choice is usually like marshmallow. You could also use something like, you could put like echinacea and barberry in there for infections, infection control. You could put usnea in there all powdered up. So you've got a number of options if you're making a wound powder for infection and controlling the blood. But if you have, let's say, a very serious bleed where it's gushing, then you'd probably want, well, first of all, you want to apply pressure. That's the first thing that you want to do. You want to apply pressure, and you want to apply a lot of pressure. As I just saw him in the chat room there, Alaska Medic, I believe that's Chuck Used to come on as Medic Shack. Now it's Alaska Medic there. We both teach a wound care class together via my website, and this is some of the basic stuff. You need to apply pressure to the wound. That's one of the ways of getting it to stop bleeding. If you had Yarrow on your person, then you could also employ Yarrow as a powder. You could employ it as a tincture. You could. You have to also think about the size of the wound and how much is it bleeding. You're not going to put like a few drops of tincture on like this big giant gash. So you kind of have to be a little reasonable with that. How much are you carrying around in any, at any given time? But smaller wounds, where there's, maybe it's a couple of inches. It could be bleeding a lot, but, something smaller, not like a laceration that goes like down your entire bicep or something. I don't know anyone who's going to be carrying around quite that much Yarrow powder or Yarrow tincture to make that work. But some of those smaller ones you could have something in your first aid kit for. You could also be applying this as a wound wash, as a compress, as a poultice, all different ways of applying it. So a wound wash, you could make a tea out of it. But again, this would be, let's say, okay, you've got the bleeding mostly under control wherever the accident or attack or whatever took place, and now you've moved to a safer position, and now you can actually get in there and clean out the wound. So you can get some Yarrow tea and you can use that. I would probably you don't necessarily want to be applying that hot, so you would let that you don't want to apply that hot to someone's skin and then add another injury onto that. So you have to allow time for that to be cool as well. So that's not something you're going to be doing like in the moment. Like say someone's got a big cut and you have a choice to make. Okay, what do I do? Do I go put some Yarrow tea on, or do I, apply a whole lot of pressure? You apply a whole lot of pressure because I know Chuck will pop in at some point to mention about how you only have about 60 to 120 seconds, a minute to 2 minutes to get severe bleeding to stop. Let me see here. I'm just looking at the chat room. The chat room kind of looks frozen to me. Is it my thing or I'm not sure here. All right. So I'll just keep going. You only have about a minute to get bleeding to stop. So in that case, if you have a serious bleed, you apply pressure first and then go look for these other things after the fact. Don't look for them immediately. But if you've got, if you've got some kind of control over it, you're applying pressure to it. Maybe there's more than one person with you, and they can get it out. They can get, you've got like maybe it's deep, but it's only a few inches long. You could certainly get that kind of a cut, and you could put a wound powder on that. So let me see. Are there any questions? I'm not seeing any updates in the chat room, so I don't know if it's a technical thing or if it's just me, or should I try refreshing the page or not to see if that works. I don't know. All right. Let's see. I'm not seeing any updates, so let's see here. Other things to be aware of when it comes to Yarrow. It's not just the lacerations. You can use this for bruising. You can use this for the skin where, let's say, capillaries may be bursting. and I know you might be like, what the heck are you talking about? Well, for instance, let's say you've got someone who has been vomiting violently. Have you ever seen someone's face when they're really vomiting a lot? Their whole face can break out with these little red spots and these little capillaries that are bursting. You can apply this topically to that to sort of help capillaries are very fine, and they're right sort of like at the furthest edge of the body, like into the skin there. They're very surface kinds of vessels. So you could put a compress of yarrow on that. You can, oh my God, I have pages of notes here. Fevers and chills, that's number one. So let's say, like this flu that's going around, something like that. Because adults generally don't get a fever from a cold. Kids will get fevers from a cold, but adults generally don't. They get fevers from, influenza, and but that's about it. They don't. So this particular flu that's going around. Let me try and log into the chat room again. All right. So this. Okay. This flu that's going around, fever and chills. This is very common with this flu. So yarrow tea would be very helpful with that. All right, so now I'm back in, and let me see. Were there any questions from anything that I've said so far? Because I haven't been able to keep track of the chat room tonight like I normally do here. So I'm trying to pay attention everywhere, and let's see. Was there any questions about anything I said so far? Let me just put this. Asking if yarrow is anti-K or helps with K. Oh, are you talking about vitamin K with blood clotting? That's really not that. I haven't seen anything that links the two of them together. It's not so simple as this substance makes blood clot, because there are also cases of vitamin K where where yarrow, where it helps to move stuck blood, where there's been a pooling of blood for a while and you need to get it out. So I wouldn't go so far as to say that it is loaded up with vitamin K. I could be wrong on that, but I can also I can get back to you on that. There are other uses for it, though, and I think it's particularly useful for influenza, and it's not just influenza, but any major respiratory illness. So I would include this in pneumonia, and I would especially include this in tuberculosis. If you've got any kind of respiratory infection where you're having night sweat, so let's say, these infections, respiratory infections, where you end up with you can't regulate your body temperature. You can't get warm. You can't cool off. You know what that's like. You've got one of these nasty infections, and you just can't get comfortable no matter what you do. You just can't get your temperature right. One thing that yarrow can do is it can help just open up the pores and act like it's a diaphoretic, and it'll help to open up the pores. And you will sweat, but it's not like this ongoing thing. Like, it just helps you to get it out, so it can help with moving the fluids, in this case, fluids being sweat, out of the body. So in other words, it opens up the pores of your skin, sort of like, it gives the body an opportunity to cool off, which is how it helps with fevers. So, I don't want to be fever phobic because we kind of have a culture that's fever phobic. But if you're really uncomfortable, it's sort of the general rule that I go by is you could have a fever, but if you say you feel fine, I'm going to believe you, and then you're fine. If you have a fever, and it could be very, very low-grade fever, but you could be out in bed, barely able to move, and I think that person is more sick than the person who might have 104 fever but is up and awake in their room watching movies, or playing Xbox or whatever. I think that that is a less sick person than the person who is clearly showing signs of being sick. I think that, we have fevers for a reason. The body will heat itself up to a point where, it fights off these infections. Where the body is too hot and the environment is inhospitable to these viruses and bacteria. And, then, of course, you get over it. So once you've heated your body up enough. And we have a habit in the U.S. of giving anti-fever medication, which really, it's artificially stopping one of your body's defense mechanisms. For instance, I had a kid yesterday. One of my kids had a fever, but he was up fine. He was functioning. There was no reason to think that it was anything serious, and that's it. But another opportunity, another case with, my kids, where one of them had a fever, they just wanted to do nothing but sleep, but their fever was barely registered. So the point of all of this is don't be fever phobic, but if you do need to, bring down a fever, I think one of the better ways to do it is with these herbal diaphoretics, because they open the body up. You sweat, and sweat is one of the legitimate ways that we detoxify. I had another question, or rather a remark elsewhere online this week where I got into a whole thing about toxins, and somebody posted something about detoxes, and I kind of went off on a little bender just about, where it was, this time it wasn't the sock onion. This was, I guess it was a sock. Again, it's a sock. Again, why is it always with the socks? But it was somebody said take a sock and fill it up with salt and warm it up and put it next to your ear. Okay, not my ear, but they were discussing this, for an earache in general. A lot of these respiratory infections, will come with, a lot of congestion, and very easy for kids to end up with earache, some adults too. But anyway, the whole thing was a sock with salt there, and I'm with them, because that's kind of like a hot water bottle, and that'll bring a lot of comfort. There's nothing wrong with that, until they said it's going to draw out toxins from the ear. No, it's not. No, my gosh, it's not going to do that. Just no. It's a sock with salt in it. It's not coming in contact with any tissue. There's a barrier of a sock there. It's not going to do anything for toxins. And please don't talk to me about toxins until you list what you're trying to get rid of. Is it heavy metals? What is it? Some type of agricultural chemicals, pesticides, fungicides, something like that. Know what you're trying to rid yourself of. You can't just throw out this word detox and detoxing everything. But I'm sorry, but this salt sock is not like some type of strap-on liver. The liver is, the filter of the body, and then you either eliminate it or you sweat it out. That's what happens. So, anyway, for those people who haven't heard my sock onion rant, maybe I'll do another one of those at some point. But you can't just, strap on, something, like a sock full of salt to your ear, and magically, mystically, it's going to draw out some, toxins. We don't know what toxins, but nebulous. They're just toxins, and it'll draw them out. It's not even coming in contact with the tissue. So anyway, the thing is, I was talking about how this will make you sweat. Yarrow will make you sweat. So therefore, it will, because it'll make you sweat, that is a valid form of detoxification. People generally feel better once they've had a good sweat, and it breaks their fever from that. And it's different from when you take acetaminophen or ibuprofen to lower the fever, because don't you know, when the medicine wears off, the fever comes back up because you haven't done anything to kill that viral or bacterial infection that's in the body, which is why your temperature is going up to begin with. So the only thing is, in this case, you have you've allowed the body to get hot enough so that you're sweating, and then it comes out. So that's one thing to think about with Yarrow. It will help to do that, but this can be tweaked a little bit here. So let's say if you have very congested sinuses, you can use Yarrow in an herbal steam to help with that. You can take a nice hot tea, or not so hot that you burn your mouth, obviously, but a nice warm or hot cup of tea. You could use a tincture, and this will be helpful for congestion. You can also take this as a cold infusion. So if you don't know what a cold infusion is, it's not where you make a cup of tea and let it cool off. A cold infusion is where you, let's say you take a quart jar and you fill it up quarter of the way, which will be 1 cup. The mason jars will have a little measure on the side. You fill it up a quarter of the way with 1 cup of your herbal material, your plant material, and then you put room temperature water over it, and you let it sit on the counter for about 4 hours, maybe 6 hours or so. You could go up to 12, but after that, you're going to need to strain it and put it in the fridge, because water, it doesn't stay fresh for very long. Water grows bacteria, so you want to be careful of that. And leave it on the counter for, a few hours. It's not going to grow anything in that amount of time. But for about 4, 5, 6 hours, strain it. That is a cold infusion. So it's not making a hot cup of tea and letting it cool off. But if you use that cold infusion instead, and if you wanted to warm it up after that, you could. But cold infusions will extract different chemicals than hot infusions will at times. So it's really not that big of a surprise that they might have a different action or a different effect. So in that case, you'd want to use a cold infusion for things where you've got, let's say, bronchitis or pneumonia, or any time where you're coughing and, you cough up a little red-tinged phlegm because there's a little blood in there, then you want to, get Yarrow involved there. And it has a long history with being a remedy for tuberculosis. Obviously, it's not working on the bacteria itself, but it is assisting the lungs, so that the symptoms are, it's caring for the symptoms. These are comfort measures and such. Other things that it can be used for, when we look at things like bleeding hemorrhoids, I know that's sort of an indelicate topic. I'm just looking at the time. Let me talk about this, and we're going to take a break real quick here. It can sort of be an embarrassing topic for people, but hemorrhoids or diarrhea, any colitis, diverticulitis, any type of bleeding like that, especially where you see bright red blood. If it's bright red, then you want to go with Yarrow. If it's really dark, obviously, just one caveat here. If you go to the bathroom and you see blood and you don't know, like, okay, well, there's a hemorrhoid and so on, please go to the doctor. I mean, you're not supposed to see blood, okay? You're not supposed to have that. So if you do, whether it's bright red or whether it's dark, just go to the doctor first. Don't be risking anything. We have access to them now. We've got access to hospitals now. Take advantage of that. I mean, it's one thing. It's one thing to understand that, like, after an SHTF situation, which something like, in Hawaii, if that had been real, I mean, then we're really talking about an SHTF situation for a war or something, then getting to the hospital, getting to a doctor may not be so easy. So definitely take advantage of that, while you have it. So from the chat room, heard some allergies to ragweed, and it can be bad. Well, if you're allergic to ragweed, then, all I would suggest is that if you've never tried a particular herbal remedy before, don't go in by drinking a gallon of tea, or downing, a nice big dose of tincture or something like that. Take a small bit, see, take a taste of it. I mean, that's how, that's how herbalists will learn to work with an herb. You take a small bit of it. You see what it tastes like. See if there are any reactions to that, because obviously if there's a negative reaction, you don't take any more. If you start to get, allergy symptoms, to any herb, doesn't matter if it's this or anything else, obviously stop taking it. So why don't we take a little break right here, and there are still plenty more uses for yarrow that we will cover right when we get back. All right, so just keeping an eye on the time here, there's a few things that I wanted to mention. Another way that you can use yarrow would be in making an eye wash. You can use it for that, to help heal any sort of, scratches or abrasions to the cornea or so on. If you've ever had a scratch on your eye, you know that feeling. Every time you blink, you can feel it. Thankfully, the eyes heal really quickly, but you can make an eye wash just out of a tea with that, a little teeny tiny bit of salt in there to make it more like a saline solution in that water. Make sure it obviously all dissolves, but we're talking a tiny pinch. And then you just, you would use that as you would either an eye wash, or you could, if you don't want to have that rolling around in your eye directly, you could put like a face cloth in it and then apply it. You can pack wounds with this. If you needed to, you could take gauze and you could soak it in a very strong yarrow infusion, and you could pack an open wound with that. That would be helpful. You can turn it into an infused honey, which is even better, I think, for packing a wound. You can also, there are two other applications I want to talk about before we close out the show, and that is for liver and kidney. There's three things. There's liver, kidney, and some circulatory issues that it can be helpful for. So with liver and hepatitis, where you have a very inflamed liver, you can make a warm compress to apply this. This is also a bitter herb, so if you have digestive issues, you can certainly take the tincture for that. When it comes to kidneys, again, inflammation, so nephritis, and especially if there's bleeding involved. So let's say there's, a urinary tract infection and there's blood with it. Unfortunately, some people are very prone to this, and, you have an emergency situation. Hygiene is not, top-notch. It's very easy to get a UTI, and they can bring you right down. These are miserable infections, and you want to make sure that you are keeping everything moving So that's another way to use this. The other is for the skin. I had started mentioning, you could use it for the little, the capillaries and, that burst when you've been vomiting a lot. I've seen this a lot with women who have like really, really bad morning sickness and they just can't stop. They get all those little red marks. But you can also use that for, you can also like take a bath with it for like psoriasis or eczema. And I would suspect in certain cases of rosacea that you might find it helpful to sort of have like to make a toner out of it. You could add it to some witch hazel and infuse the witch hazel with it. Not every case, but I've seen some positive results using it that way for it, but it hasn't been consistent. So I think there are different causes for rosacea, and for some people it can be a big help. So I hope that there's a whole other section of this where it comes to women's health and menstrual issues and cramping, endometriosis and uterine fibroids. That's a whole other involved topic, but Yarrow would be applicable in many of these. Again, the blood has to be bright red. So, Highlander, I don't have any experience with it for Crohn's, but I can see why people would say that. And yes, arthritis, it can be helpful for arthritis or those painful joints, things like that. So I hope that you have a little bit of an understanding as to how to work with this herb. I'm going to be talking more about it in that wound care class that I mentioned earlier, and how to use it and when other herbs are appropriate. There are other classes coming up in a number of months. I don't want to start anything new just yet. I have a habit of taking on more than I can chew at times, but I do have an eye on other classes down the line. But I hope that this does give you some appreciation for the range of uses for Yarrow. It's not just the battlefield herb, but it's really good at controlling the flow of blood. So if you like what you've heard, please do connect with me by following me on Facebook, Twitter, G+, Pinterest, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out herbalprepper.com. Sign up for that newsletter. And thank you, everyone, for spending your time with me. I hope you got something out of it. This has been Kat, the Herbal Prepper, with Herbal Prepper Live, and we will see you next week.